The scent of burnt sugar and spiced wine hung heavy in the palace corridors, masking something sharper beneath. Ambition, perhaps, or desperation. I kept my head bowed as I moved between the towering marble pillars, balancing a tray of freshly polished crystal goblets meant for tonight's selection ceremony. My pale blonde hair was tucked tightly beneath my servant's cap, though a few rebellious strands had escaped during the long hours of preparation, tickling my neck with each hurried step. The king would choose his bride tonight. Every noble family in the 7 territories had presented their daughters, each one more beautiful and accomplished than the last. For weeks, the palace had been transforming into a glittering stage for this ancient ritual, and for weeks I had been invisible, just another pair of hands ensuring everything shone to perfection. "Mind yourself, girl," hissed Lady Morgaine, the head of household staff, as I nearly collided with her while rounding a corner. "Those goblets cost more than you'd earn in 10 lifetimes. Break one, and it comes from your meals for a month." "Yes, my lady," I whispered, steadying the tray with practiced fingers. My stomach clenched at the thought. I was already thin enough that my bones pressed against my skin, like secrets trying to escape. Lady Morgaine's eyes narrowed, taking inventory of my appearance with calculated displeasure. "And for heaven's sake, tuck in that hair. You look like a beggar, not a royal servant." Her fingers reached out, painfully securing the offending strands beneath my cap. "Remember your place tonight. You are to be invisible. The Alpha King mustn't be distracted from his selection." As if he would notice me at all, King Alaric. No, we were never to speak his given name. The Alpha King had only been in power for 3 months following his father's sudden death. I had glimpsed him exactly twice. Once at the coronation procession, where he had ridden a midnight stallion through the capital's streets, his face a mask of controlled grief, and once in a palace corridor, where I had pressed myself against the wall, eyes downcast as tradition demanded when royalty passed. Both times, I had sensed rather than seen him, a forceful presence that seemed to displace the very air around him, leaving a vacuum in his wake. The nobles called it the Alpha Aura, that unmistakable energy that marked those born to rule. Some claimed it was magic, others said it was merely the confidence of absolute power. "Girl, are you listening?" Lady Morgaine snapped her fingers before my face. "Yes, my lady. Invisible. I understand." She sniffed disapprovingly. "See that you are. Now, deliver those to the Grand Hall, and then help with the final preparations in the princess's waiting chamber. The ceremony begins at sunset." I hurried away, grateful to escape her cold gaze. The palace was a labyrinth of whispers today, servants and nobles alike trading rumors about which princess would be chosen. The Emerald Isles had sent their famed beauty, Princess Alara, whose eyes matched the jewels of her homeland. The Desert Kingdom offered Princess Nisa, whose dowry reportedly included 300 war elephants. The Mountain Territories presented the learned Princess Seraphina, educated in 7 languages, and the ancient arts of diplomacy. And then there was Princess Valentia, from the neighboring kingdom, our closest ally and sometimes rival. She was said to be not just beautiful, but cunning, raised from birth to be a queen. Her mother had been training her in statecraft since she could speak, and her father had ensured she understood military strategy like a seasoned general. These women were bred for this moment, cultivated like rare orchids for the singular purpose of standing beside a king. And I was nobody. The orphaned daughter of a palace laundress who had died of fever when I was 12. I had been given the mercy of a servant's position, only because the previous queen had remembered my mother's gentle hands that never shrank the royal linens. My fingers absently touched the small silver pendant hidden beneath my uniform, my only inheritance. My mother had always claimed it belonged to my unknown father, though its design was unlike anything in our kingdom, a crescent moon embracing a single star. "Remember who you are," she would whisper each night before sleep claimed me, "even when the world forces you to forget." I reached the Grand Hall, where dozens of servants were putting final touches on what would be the setting for tonight's ceremony. Crystal chandeliers dripped with light, their facets throwing rainbow splinters across marble floors. Garlands of winter roses and gilded leaves wrapped around columns, their perfume almost overwhelming in the enclosed space. "Those go on the high table," directed an older servant, pointing to where my goblets should be placed. "Carefully now." I arranged them precisely, each one exactly 2 fingers' width from its neighbor, as I had been taught. As I worked, a hush fell over the hall, rippling outward from the main entrance like a stone dropped in still water. I turned. Curious despite myself, he stood in the doorway, surveying the preparations with an intensity that seemed to lower the temperature of the room, the Alpha King. Taller than I remembered, broader through the shoulders, his presence somehow both perfectly still and barely contained, like a storm deciding where to strike. Unlike his father, who had favored ornate robes and multiple crowns, he wore a simple circlet of black metal and a tailored jacket of midnight blue that made his pale skin seem almost luminous. But it was his eyes that commanded attention, silver gray like polished steel, taking in everything while revealing nothing. I should have looked away, should have remembered my place, but something about him caught and held me. Perhaps it was the solitude that clung to him despite the dozen advisors hovering nearby. Perhaps it was the almost imperceptible tightness around his mouth, the only indication that this ceremony was not entirely of his choosing. And then, impossibly, his gaze shifted. Across the crowded hall, past nobles and servants alike, those silver eyes locked with mine, the world contracted to that single point of connection. I couldn't breathe, couldn't move. Every instinct screamed to lower my eyes, to remember my station, but my body refused to obey. 1 heartbeat, 2, 3. His expression didn't change, yet something flickered in those depths. Recognition, curiosity, annoyance. Before I could decipher it, one of his advisors leaned in, murmuring something urgent, and the moment shattered. I finally remembered myself, dropping into a deep curtsy, my heart hammering so violently I feared it might crack my ribs. When I dared raise my head again, he was gone, swept away by the tide of preparation, leaving only a lingering sense of something unfinished. "Are you trying to get yourself dismissed?" hissed a voice beside me. Marta, another servant girl who had started in the palace around the same time as me. Staring at the king like that. "Have you lost your mind?" I wasn't staring, I protested weakly. I was just surprised. Marta rolled her eyes. "Well, be surprised with your eyes on the floor next time. Now come on. We're needed in the princess's chamber. They're in a state about some missing perfume oil, and Lady Morgaine is threatening to have someone flogged if it isn't found before the ceremony." I followed her through the servants' passages, trying to shake the lingering sensation of the king's gaze. It meant nothing, I told myself firmly. A coincidence. He hadn't really seen me, not as a person. I was just another servant, a piece of the palace machinery. The princess's waiting chamber was chaos contained only by the rigid social hierarchies that prevented actual physical confrontation. 5 royal women and their attendants occupied the space designed for comfort, but not for the competing energies of rivals. The air was thick with expensive perfumes, each chosen to enhance its wearer's natural scent, a critical advantage in a ceremony where the Alpha King's heightened senses would guide his choice as much as political considerations. Princess Valentia stood apart from the others, her posture perfect as her attendant made minute adjustments to her elaborate golden gown. She was beautiful in the way of polished weapons, all gleaming edges and deadly purpose. "You," she snapped, noticing me hovering near the door. "Fetch more rose water. This batch is too diluted." I cursed and turned to comply, but not before catching the almost invisible tremor in her perfectly manicured hands. Even she, bred for this moment, was afraid. I hurried to the still room where essences and oils were stored, grateful for the momentary solitude. My mind kept returning to that strange moment in the great hall, to the king's silver eyes finding mine across an impossible distance. A coincidence. Nothing more. Yet my heart raced at the memory, as if it recognized something my mind could not yet grasp. The small still room was cool and fragrant, lined with bottles of colored glass containing everything from common lavender water to rare essences worth more than a servant's yearly wage. I located the rose water quickly, but paused before returning, allowing myself one deep breath away from the tension upstairs. "It doesn't suit her." The voice, low, resonant, unmistakably male, came from behind me. I spun around, the bottle nearly slipping from my suddenly nerveless fingers. He stood in the doorway, blocking the only exit, his broad shoulders almost touching both sides of the frame, the Alpha King. Here, alone, with no advisors or guards in sight, I dropped immediately into a deep curtsy, my eyes fixed on the floor. "Your Majesty, forgive me, I didn't rise," he said quietly. I obeyed, keeping my gaze lowered as protocol demanded. Look at me. That was not protocol. That was the opposite of everything I had been taught. Yet his voice carried the unmistakable weight of command. Not just a king's authority, but something more primal, something that reached past conscious thought to the part of the mind that recognized power in its rawest form. Slowly, I raised my eyes to his. "The rosewater," he said, his voice oddly conversational, as if we were discussing the weather. "It doesn't suit Princess Valentia. Her natural scent is more cedar and amber." I blinked, completely at a loss for how to respond to this bizarre observation. I only follow orders, Your Majesty." A slight curve touched his lips. Not quite a smile. "As do I, it seems." He tilted his head slightly, studying me with unnerving intensity. "What's your name?" "Elowin, Your Majesty." My voice sounded strange to my own ears, too steady when I felt anything but. "Elowin," he repeated, as if tasting the syllables. "You've served in the palace long?" "Since I was 12, Your Majesty. My mother before me." Something shifted in his expression. A softening around the eyes, perhaps, and yet we've never spoken. "It wouldn't be proper, Your Majesty." The words came automatically, drilled into me through years of service. "Proper," he echoed, the word carrying a weight of weariness I hadn't expected. For a moment, he looked younger, less like the fearsome Alpha King, and more like a man trapped in a role not entirely of his choosing. Then the vulnerability vanished so completely, I wondered if I had imagined it. "The ceremony begins in an hour. You should return that to the princess." He stepped aside, clearing my path to the door. As I moved to pass him, careful to maintain proper distance, he spoke again. "Elowin." I paused, my heart leaping at the sound of my name on his lips. "Your pendant. Where did you get it?" My free hand flew to my throat, where the silver crescent moon and star lay hidden beneath my uniform. It was supposed to be invisible. How had he— "It was my mother's, Your Majesty. A gift from my father," she said. His eyes narrowed slightly, a flash of something, recognition, suspicion, crossing his features before his expression smoothed once more into regal impassivity. "I see. You may go." I cursed again and hurried from the still room, the weight of his gaze following me like a physical touch. Only when I reached the main corridor did I realize I was trembling, though whether from fear or something else entirely, I couldn't say. The selection ceremony began as the last rays of sunlight retreated from the stained glass windows of the grand hall, leaving behind a cathedral of candlelight and anticipation. I stood with the other servants along the wall, hands clasped before me, eyes properly lowered, though my mind remained turbulent with questions about my strange encounter with the king. Had he recognized my pendant? The thought was absurd. It was a simple thing of tarnished silver, not some royal heirloom. Yet his reaction suggested otherwise. I pushed the thoughts away, focusing on maintaining the perfect stillness expected of palace servants during royal ceremonies. The 5 princesses entered in order of their kingdom's alliances with our own, each a vision of calculated perfection. Princess Valentia led the procession, the golden threads in her gown capturing and reflecting candlelight with each measured step. Princess Serafina followed, her midnight blue dress adorned with constellations of tiny diamonds. Princess Nisa came third, copper skin gleaming against emerald silk. Princess Alara was fourth, her famous eyes enhanced by cosmetics that extended their cat-like tilt. Last came Princess Daria of the Frostlands, wrapped in white fur and silver, her platinum hair nearly identical to my own hidden beneath my servant's cap, though hers was arranged in an elaborate crown of braids studded with ice diamonds. Each princess carried herself with practiced grace, yet I could see the subtle signs of tension, a too-tight grip on a ceremonial fan, the slight stiffness in a smile, the barely perceptible quickness of breath. These women had been groomed since birth for this moment, yet they remained human beneath their royal veneers, subject to the same fears as anyone facing judgment. The crowd parted as the king entered from the opposite end of the hall. He had changed into formal attire, a tailored jacket of deepest black embroidered with silver thread and patterns that seemed to shift in the candlelight, creating the illusion of living shadows. The simple circlet had been replaced by the ceremonial crown, a weaving of black metal branches that mimicked the sacred forests surrounding our kingdom, each tip bearing a single clear stone that caught and fractured light. He moved with the fluid confidence of a predator, unhurried yet unmistakably dangerous. The whispers that had filled the hall died instantly, replaced by a silence so complete I could hear the soft hiss of candle flames. Lord Chancellor Thorne, the aging advisor who had served both the current king and his father, stepped forward to begin the ceremony. "Tonight," his voice rang through the hall, "we honor the ancient tradition of selection. Since time immemorial, the alpha kings of our realm have chosen their mates not merely for political advantage, but guided by instinct and the wisdom of the wolf's blood that runs in royal veins. Tonight, our king will walk among the 5 princesses chosen as worthy candidates. He will scent them, speak with them, and by night's end, declare his choice for queen." A murmur of anticipation rippled through the assembled nobles. The selection ceremony was more than political theater. It was a reminder that our royalty was different, touched by ancient magic that gave them heightened senses, preternatural strength, and the commanding presence that made them natural rulers. The commoners called them blessed by the gods. The scholars called them evolutionary marvels. The neighboring kingdoms called them dangerous. Whatever the truth, tonight that difference would determine the future of our kingdom and the life of one princess who would become queen. The king began his circuit of the princesses, moving to Princess Valentia first. Protocol dictated a specific interaction. He would take her hands, draw close enough to catch her scent, and engage in brief conversation. Simple enough, yet loaded with significance. The alpha senses could detect emotions through scent, fear, ambition, sincerity, deceit, all laid bare to royal perception. I watched, transfixed despite myself, as he performed the ritual with each princess in turn. With Valentia, he was courteous but reserved, their conversation too quiet for anyone to overhear. Princess Serafina earned a slight smile, the first I'd seen from him all evening. Princess Nisa's interaction was briefest, while Princess Alara seemed to capture his attention for several minutes, their heads bent close in conversation. When he reached Princess Daria, something shifted in his demeanor, a subtle tensing that only someone watching as intently as I was might notice. Throughout it all, I maintained my servant's pose, the perfect picture of respectful invisibility. Yet somehow, impossibly, I felt his awareness of me like a physical touch, as if some part of his attention remained fixed on my presence even as he performed his royal duties. Madness, I told myself. The stress of our earlier encounter had clearly affected my mind. He was the Alpha King, engaged in selecting his future queen from 5 perfect princesses. I was nothing, less than nothing in this glittering assembly. The formal introductions complete, the ceremony moved to its second phase. Musicians began to play, filling the hall with haunting melodies, as servants, myself included, moved forward with trays of wine and delicacies. This portion of the evening allowed the king to observe the princesses in a more social setting, noting how they interacted with others, as well as with him. I kept to the edges of the gathering, serving nobles of lesser rank while other servants attended the royal circle. This suited me perfectly. The further I stayed from those unsettling silver eyes, the better. "The king favors Princess Alara," whispered Marta, as we refreshed our trays at the servants' station. "Did you see how long they spoke? My cousin serves in her household. Says she's been studying our kingdom's history and customs for years in preparation." "I thought Princess Serafina made him smile," offered another servant, a boy whose name I couldn't recall. "It means nothing," said an older servant dismissively. "The Alpha Kings never choose for simple preference. It's instinct that guides them. Something in the scent that marks a true mate. My grandmother served during the last selection," said the old king, barely glanced at the princess everyone expected him to choose, went straight to our late queen instead. I moved away from their gossip, uncomfortable with this dissection of the king's behavior. My tray now restocked with crystal goblets of spiced wine, I returned to the hall, carefully navigating between clusters of richly dressed nobles. Absolutely certain? A sharp female voice caught my attention as I passed behind a column. You've checked everywhere? I slowed, recognizing Princess Valentia's voice, though I couldn't see her from my position. Yes, Your Highness. The responding voice belonged to one of her attendants. It wasn't in your chambers or among your luggage. It must have been taken. Find it, Valentia hissed, her voice tight with barely controlled panic. That vial contains everything. Without it, she broke off suddenly, perhaps sensing potential eavesdroppers. I hurried past, pretending I'd heard nothing. Whatever Princess Valentia had lost clearly held great importance to her, though I couldn't imagine what could cause such distress in a woman otherwise so composed. As the evening progressed, I noticed a subtle shift in the atmosphere. The king, who had been moving methodically between the princesses, now seemed distracted, his gaze repeatedly scanning the hall as if searching for something or someone. A frown creased his forehead, his responses to those addressing him growing more clipped, his posture increasingly tense. I was serving a minor noble from the southern provinces when I felt it. That same electric awareness from earlier. Without looking, I knew he was watching me. Slowly, I raised my eyes, unable to resist the pull of that silent summons. Across the crowded hall, the king's gaze locked with mine. This time, there was no mistaking the intentionality. He had been looking for me, and now that he'd found me, he didn't look away. The noble I was serving followed the direction of my gaze, his expression shifting from confusion to shock as he realized who had captured my attention. Belatedly, I dropped my eyes, my face burning with embarrassment. To be caught staring at the king during his own selection ceremony. I would be fortunate if mere dismissal was my punishment. You, the noble said, his voice low and dangerous. Know your place, girl. Yes, my lord. I apologize, my lord. I bobbed a hasty curtsy, desperately wishing the marble floor would open and swallow me whole. Is there a problem here? The new voice, deep, commanding, brooking no argument, sent ice down my spine. I kept my eyes fixed on the floor as a pair of polished black boots entered my field of vision. The noble who had been reprimanding me dropped immediately into a deep bow. Your Majesty. No problem at all, simply instructing a servant on proper etiquette. I see. The king's voice betrayed nothing of his thoughts. You've done your duty admirably, Lord. Harwick, Your Majesty. Baron Harwick of the southern provinces. Lord Harwick. I believe Lord Chancellor Thorne was asking after you earlier, something about southern border defenses. You should find him without delay. The dismissal was clear, if unusually polite. Lord Harwick bowed again and retreated, leaving me alone with the king in the midst of hundreds of watching eyes. I could feel the weight of their stares, the confused whispers already beginning to circulate. Elawan. He spoke my name softly, yet with unmistakable command. Look at me. I obeyed, raising my eyes to his. The intensity I found there stole my breath. Not anger, as I had feared, but something far more unsettling, curiosity mixed with something darker, more primitive. Your Majesty, I whispered, fighting to keep my voice steady. I apologize for any distraction. Please, you should return to the princesses. They await your decision. Yes, he said, though he made no move to leave. They do. Tell me, what do you think of them? Which would you choose, if the decision were yours? The question was so unexpected, so inappropriate, that for a moment I thought I'd misheard. I couldn't presume to, that is, I'm not qualified to. Speak freely, he interrupted. No one else will hear. Indeed. Though we stood in the middle of the crowded hall, a strange bubble of privacy seemed to have formed around us. Nobles and servants alike kept their distance, eyes carefully averted, as if by unspoken agreement. I swallowed hard, gathering my courage. They are all worthy, Your Majesty. Beautiful, accomplished, politically advantageous, any would make a suitable queen. Suitable. He repeated the word with faint distaste. Yes, they are all suitable, bred and trained and scented for this very purpose. And yet... He trailed off, his gaze moving past me to where the 5 princesses stood in a loose group, all pretending not to watch our interaction with varying degrees of success. "What is it you're not telling me, Elowen?" he asked suddenly, his attention snapping back to me with startling focus. "What do you know of Princess Valentia's missing vial?" My heart stuttered. How could he possibly know I'd overheard that conversation? "Nothing, Your Majesty. You're lying." It wasn't an accusation, but a simple statement of fact. "I can hear your heartbeat, smell the change in your scent. Tell me what you heard." The stories were true then. The alpha senses were real and far more acute than common rumor suggested. I licked dry lips, knowing further deception was pointless. "I overheard Princess Valentia speaking with her attendant. Something valuable is missing. A vial of some kind." She seemed frightened by its loss. His eyes narrowed slightly. Frightened. Yes, she would be. "Do you know why?" I shook my head. "No, Your Majesty." He studied me for a long moment, as if weighing my honesty. Whatever he saw in my face must have satisfied him, for he gave a slight nod. "Return to your duties, Elowen, but remain where I can see you." It was a strange command, one that made little sense given the circumstances, yet I didn't dare question it. "Yes, Your Majesty." He turned away, moving back toward the waiting princesses, leaving me trembling in his wake. Around me, the bubble of isolation dissolved as conversation resumed, though now punctuated with curious glances in my direction. I forced myself to continue serving, though my hands shook so badly I feared I might drop my tray at any moment. What had just happened? Why would the king, in the middle of choosing his future queen, concern himself with a servant girl and overheard gossip about a missing vial? As I circulated through the hall, I became aware of subtle tensions I hadn't noticed before. Princess Valentia's composure had fractured slightly, her eyes darting nervously around the room when she thought no one was watching. Princess Alara kept close to the king's side, her possessive stance suggesting she believed herself the front-runner in this competition. The other 3 princesses had formed a loose alliance, their heads bent together in whispered conversation that ceased whenever anyone approached. And through it all, I felt the king's awareness of me, a constant, unsettling presence at the edges of my consciousness. True to his command, I stayed within his line of sight, though I couldn't begin to understand why it mattered. The music shifted to a more ceremonial tune, signaling the approach of the final phase of the evening. Soon, the king would announce his choice, and one princess would become queen, while the others retreated to their kingdoms with empty hands and wounded pride. Lord Chancellor Thorne appeared at the king's side, murmuring something urgently in his ear. The king's expression darkened, his posture stiffening as he gave a sharp nod. Together they moved toward a side entrance, disappearing momentarily from the hall. A collective breath seemed to be held in their absence. The 5 princesses exchanged glances, ranging from confused to calculating. The nobles whispered behind jeweled hands. Even the servants stilled, sensing the disruption in the carefully choreographed ceremony. "What's happening?" Marta appeared at my elbow, her eyes wide. "This isn't part of the traditional sequence." Before I could respond, the king returned alone, his expression now carefully neutral, though a muscle worked in his jaw, betraying tension. He moved directly to the dais at the front of the hall, his presence commanding immediate silence. "Lords and ladies, honored guests," he began, his voice carrying effortlessly to every corner of the vast space. "I thank you for your patience this evening. Before I announce my decision, there is a matter of security that must be addressed." Murmurs rippled through the crowd, confusion giving way to concern. "It has come to my attention," the king continued, "that someone in this hall is carrying a substance known as lunaria extract, a powerful scent-altering compound outlawed in our kingdom for over a century due to its use in manipulating alpha senses." Gasps and shocked whispers erupted. The 5 princesses exchanged startled glances, though Princess Valentia's face had gone deathly pale. "This substance," the king's voice hardened, "was intended to influence my selection tonight. Such treachery cannot, will not, be tolerated." The hall had gone completely silent now, hundreds of eyes watching in horrified fascination as the king stepped down from the dais and began to move through the crowd. Unlike his earlier circuit of the princesses, there was nothing ceremonial in his movements now. He stalked through the assembly like a predator scenting prey, his focus absolute. He passed by nobles and servants alike, all of whom shrank back from his approach. When he reached the princesses, he paused only briefly before each, his expression revealing nothing of his thoughts. And then, to the shock of everyone present, he turned toward me. The king's approach felt like watching an avalanche, unstoppable, inevitable, and utterly terrifying. I stood frozen, my servant's tray clutched in white-knuckled fingers as he closed the distance between us with deliberate steps. Around me, other servants melted away, creating an island of isolation that left me nowhere to hide. "Your Majesty," I managed, dropping into a deep curtsy that I hoped might somehow make me disappear. He stopped directly before me, close enough that I could smell the subtle cedar and metal scent that clung to his skin. "Give me your hand, Elowen." The command, spoken quietly, yet with unquestionable authority, left no room for refusal. I placed my tray on a nearby table with shaking hands, then slowly extended my right hand, palm up. The collective intake of breath from the watching crowd was audible. No king touched a servant so publicly. It simply wasn't done. Yet here he stood, waiting for my hand as if I were one of the princesses. His fingers closed around mine, warm and unexpectedly gentle despite their strength. He turned my hand over, examining my palm with strange intensity before raising his gaze to mine. "You have not touched the Lunaria extract," he stated, his voice pitched for my ears alone, though I had no doubt that in the perfect silence of the hall, others could hear as well. "No, Your Majesty," I whispered, confusion overwhelming fear for a moment. "I don't even know what that is." He nodded as if I had confirmed something important. "Yet you have been near it, recently. The trace is faint, but unmistakable." My mind raced back through the day's activities. The princess's chamber, the still room, the rosewater I'd been sent to fetch for Princess Valentia. Understanding dawned with sickening clarity. "The rosewater," I breathed. "It wasn't rosewater at all, was it?" Something like approval flickered in his silver eyes. "No, it was not." He released my hand but remained close, his next words clearly intended for the entire assembly. "The servant girl is innocent of wrongdoing. She was merely a vessel for another's deception." His gaze swept the hall, coming to rest on Princess Valentia, who stood rigid with fear, her golden gown now seeming more cage than finery. "Is there something you wish to tell us, Princess?" For a moment, I thought she might deny it, might attempt to salvage her rapidly crumbling facade of innocence. Instead, her chin lifted in defiance, fear giving way to cold fury. "You would have chosen me anyway," she said, her voice carrying the absolute conviction of someone raised to believe in their own superiority. "I merely ensured what should have been inevitable. My kingdom is the strongest ally you have, the most militarily advantageous match. The Lunaria simply would have clarified your thinking." Shocked gasps and whispers rippled through the crowd. Lord Chancellor Thorne stepped forward, his aged face grave. "Princess Valentia, you admit to attempting to manipulate the sacred selection through forbidden means?" "Sacred?" She laughed, a brittle sound devoid of humor. "There is nothing sacred about this barbaric ritual. You dress it up in ceremony, but it's nothing more than animal instinct elevated to absurd importance. I refuse to leave my future, my kingdom's future, to the whims of primitive biology." The king's expression had gone dangerously still. "And yet, despite your clever machinations, you failed. The Lunaria extract never reached me. Your plan was thwarted before it began." Princess Valentia's gaze darted to me, hatred blazing in her eyes, because of a serving girl, a nobody. "Not a nobody," the king corrected softly. "Elowen." The sound of my name on his lips sent a shiver down my spine. Around us, the assembled nobles exchanged confused glances, clearly struggling to understand why the king would defend a servant so personally. Lord Chancellor Thorne cleared his throat. "Your Majesty, perhaps we should continue this discussion privately. The princess's actions, while serious, need not disrupt the remainder of the ceremony." The king didn't look away from me as he responded. "On the contrary, Lord Chancellor, the ceremony has served its purpose perfectly, Your Majesty." Thorne's confusion was evident. "I have found what I was searching for." The king's voice changed, taking on a formal quality that silenced the whispers instantly. He turned to address the full assembly, his decision apparently made. Lords and ladies of the court, honored princesses, the selection is complete. This announcement, coming after the shocking revelations about Princess Valentia, created a ripple of anticipation. The remaining 4 princesses straightened, each composing her features into an expression of hopeful dignity. Even Princess Valentia seemed to rally, perhaps believing that her transgression would be overlooked in favor of political expediency. Since time immemorial, the king continued, the alpha kings of our realm have chosen their mates guided by instinct and the wisdom of the wolf's blood that runs in royal veins. Tonight, I honor that tradition. He paused, his gaze sweeping the hall before returning inexplicably to me. I choose Eloin. The words hung in the air, impossible and absolute. For a moment, the hall was so silent, I could hear the soft crackle of candle flames and the distant call of a nightbird outside the windows. Then, chaos erupted. A servant girl? Impossible. This is an outrage. The princess's reactions ranged from shock to fury. Princess Alara looked as if she'd been slapped. Princess Seraphina's scholarly composure cracked completely as she burst into tears. Princess Nisa and Princess Daria exchanged glances of disbelief. And Princess Valentia, her face transformed into a mask of such hatred that I took an involuntary step backward. Lord Chancellor Thorne moved quickly to the king's side, his voice urgent, though too low for me to hear over the growing clamor. Whatever he said, the king dismissed it with a sharp gesture. My decision is final, he declared, his voice cutting through the noise with effortless authority. Elowen will be my queen. I stood rooted to the spot, unable to process what was happening. This had to be some elaborate punishment for Princess Valentia, some tactical move in a political game beyond my understanding. The alternative, that he actually meant what he said, was simply inconceivable. Your Majesty, I finally managed, my voice barely audible even to my own ears. This isn't... I can't. I'm just a servant. He turned to me, something softening in his expression. No, he said simply. You are much more than that, and I believe you have always known it. His hand moved to my throat, fingers brushing against the silver pendant hidden beneath my uniform. This is no common trinket. It is the symbol of the Moonstar clan, the oldest alpha bloodline in the known world. Your father was not some nameless commoner, Elowen. He was alpha-born. The revelation struck me like a physical blow. My mother had never spoken of my father except to say he had loved her deeply but could not stay. I had assumed he was a soldier, perhaps, or a merchant. Someone whose life of travel made a family impossible. Never, not even in my wildest imaginings, had I considered royal blood. That's not possible, I whispered. It is not only possible, it is certain. I recognized the pendant the moment I saw it, just as I recognized something in you from our first encounter. He spoke with absolute conviction. The blood calls to blood. The alphas of old believed that true mates would always find each other, regardless of circumstance or station. Tonight proves they were right. Around us, the chaos had organized itself into factions. Lord Chancellor Thorne and several elder nobles had formed a protective circle around us, holding back the more vocal protesters. The 4 remaining princesses were being escorted from the hall by their attendants, their expressions varying from devastated to coldly furious. Princess Valentia alone remained, flanked by royal guards who now treated her as a potential threat rather than an honored guest. Take the princess to the East Wing, the king instructed the captain of the guard. She will be confined there until arrangements can be made for her return journey. You'll regret this, Valentia hissed, all pretense of civility abandoned. My father will not accept such an insult lightly. War has begun for less. The king met her gaze with impassive calm. Your father will be informed of your attempt to drug a neighboring sovereign with a banned substance. I doubt he will be eager to defend such actions, even from his beloved daughter. His voice hardened. But should he choose conflict, he will find us prepared. She was led away, her golden gown whispering against marble floors like a final bitter accusation. Lord Chancellor Thorne approached, his aged face grave with concern. Your Majesty, while I would never presume to question your judgment, perhaps a more gradual announcement would have been politically prudent. The ramifications of bypassing all 5 royal candidates will be significant. I am aware of the ramifications, Lord Chancellor. The king's tone was firm, but not unkind. Nevertheless, my decision stands. Prepare the formal proclamation. The coronation will take place at the next full moon. Thorne bowed deeply, though I could see resignation rather than acceptance in the set of his shoulders. As you command, Your Majesty. As the hall gradually emptied of stunned nobles and confused servants, I remained where I stood, still struggling to comprehend the seismic shift in my reality. One moment a servant, the next supposedly alpha-blooded and selected as queen. It made no sense. You're in shock. The king. No, I couldn't think of him that way now. Not when he had just declared me his chosen mate, said quietly. That's to be expected. Come. We should speak privately. He offered his arm, the gesture so at odds with our respective stations that I nearly laughed from sheer hysteria. When I hesitated, he added with surprising gentleness, No harm will come to you, Elowen. You have my word. Somehow, despite everything, I believed him. I placed my hand on his arm, acutely aware of the contrast between my rough servant's uniform and his fine royal attire. He led me from the grand hall through a side door I had never used, into corridors reserved exclusively for royalty. 2 guards followed at a discreet distance, their expressions carefully neutral, though I could well imagine their thoughts. The king guided me to a small but elegantly appointed sitting room, gesturing for the guards to remain outside before closing the door. Alone with him, I found my voice at last. This is madness. You can't possibly mean to make me queen. The court will never accept it. The neighboring kingdoms will see it as an insult. You're risking everything for what? I don't understand. Don't you? He moved closer, studying me with those unsettling silver eyes. From the moment I saw you in that hall, something inside me recognized you. Not consciously at first, just an awareness, a pull I couldn't explain. Then I saw your pendant, and pieces began to fall into place. A pendant proves nothing, I protested. My mother could have acquired it anywhere, from anyone. The Moonstar pendant is not merely jewelry. It is a blood key. It responds only to those of Alpha lineage. May I? He held out his hand. Reluctantly, I pulled the chain from beneath my collar, allowing the silver crescent moon and star to rest in my palm. He reached out, his fingers brushing mine as he touched the pendant. To my astonishment, the metal began to glow faintly, a soft blue luminescence that pulsed like a heartbeat. It recognizes you, I whispered, unable to deny the evidence before my eyes. As it recognizes you, he withdrew his hand, and the glow faded, but didn't disappear completely. The pendant wouldn't respond to a common servant, Elowen. The blood of the Moonstar clan flows in your veins, diluted perhaps, but unmistakably present. I sank onto a nearby chair, my legs suddenly unable to support me. Even if that's true, and I'm not saying I believe it, it doesn't explain this, your choice. There are protocols, political considerations. You can't just claim a servant girl as queen because of some ancient bloodline, can't I? A hint of amusement colored his voice. I am the Alpha King. The selection is mine to make, guided by instinct as much as reason. The amusement faded, replaced by something more serious, almost vulnerable. When I learned my father was dying, he told me to trust what the wolf inside me recognized. I didn't understand what he meant until tonight. He knelt before my chair, bringing himself to eye level, an unprecedented act for a king. The 5 princesses were chosen for political advantage, for beauty, for accomplishment. But none of them called to that deeper part of me, the alpha instinct that recognizes its true mate. You did. This is happening too fast, I said, my voice unsteady. Yesterday I was polishing goblets and turning down beds. Today you're telling me I have royal blood and asking me to be queen. I don't know how to be what you're asking of me. You don't need to know yet. You'll learn. His certainty was both reassuring and terrifying. The question is not whether you can be queen, Elowen. The question is whether you want to be. The question struck me silent. Want? When had anyone last asked what I wanted? Servants didn't have the luxury of desire. We had duties, obligations, the narrow parameters of a life defined by others' needs. The concept of choice, real, consequential choice, was so foreign I hardly knew how to process it. "I don't know what I want," I admitted finally. "All of this is too much to grasp. But I do know I don't want to be part of a decision that harms your kingdom or your position. If making me queen would do either of those things, then I want no part of it." Something like approval flickered in his eyes. "A response worthy of a queen, regardless of your origins. But you needn't fear on that account. The initial shock will pass. The court will adapt, as courts always do, and while some neighboring kingdoms may indeed take offense, others will see the advantages of an alpha queen with no existing political ties." "An alpha queen?" I repeated, focusing on the most startling part of his statement. "I'm not an alpha. I'm not anything." He smiled then, the expression transforming his austere features into something almost boyish. "You've never been tested for alpha traits, have you? Never been evaluated for enhanced senses or strength?" "Of course not. Such tests are reserved for nobles and their offspring." I paused, a memory surfacing. My mother insisting I avoid the palace healers even when ill, her strange protectiveness whenever the royal family was discussed. "You think my mother was hiding my heritage deliberately, keeping me from discovery? It would make sense if your father was alpha-born, but not from our kingdom. Cross-territorial alpha unions were politically complicated a generation ago. Some were even forbidden. Your mother may have been protecting you the only way she could." The idea that my quiet, hard-working mother had been guarding such a secret all those years made my chest ache with fresh grief over her loss. How lonely she must have been, carrying that burden alone. "There's one way to be certain," he said, interrupting my thoughts. He offered his hand. "Come with me." I hesitated only briefly before placing my fingers in his. He led me deeper into the royal wing, past ornate doors and priceless tapestries, to a small, unadorned wooden door that seemed oddly out of place among such splendor. "The heart chamber," he explained, producing a key that hung on a chain around his neck. "Only the ruling alpha may enter, and those they bring with them." The lock turned with a soft click, and the door swung inward to reveal not the treasure vault I had expected, but a simple circular room lined with rough stone. In its center stood a pedestal holding what appeared to be a clear crystal sphere about the size of a man's fist. "The Heartstone," the king said quietly. "It has been the test of alpha bloodlines since the founding of our kingdom. If you have the wolf's blood in your veins, the stone will respond to your touch." I stared at the innocuous-looking crystal, suddenly afraid. "And if it doesn't respond? If I'm just a servant after all?" His fingers tightened around mine briefly. "Then I will have made a very public mistake, but I will not retract my choice regardless. I meant what I said in the hall, Eloin. You will be my queen." The fierce certainty in his voice sent warmth cascading through me, chasing away doubt. Whatever happened next, whatever the stone revealed, he had already decided. The realization was both terrifying and exhilarating. I approached the pedestal slowly, aware of the weight of history in this simple room. How many before me had faced this test? How many had passed or failed? And what would it mean for me if the stone confirmed what he believed? "What do I do?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "Place your hand on the stone. The rest will happen on its own." Drawing a deep breath, I extended my hand and laid my palm flat against the cool crystal surface. For a moment, nothing happened, and disappointment began to settle in my stomach. Then, slowly, the stone began to warm beneath my touch. Light kindled at its core, not the soft blue of my pendant, but a deep, rich gold that pulsed like a heartbeat. "Gold," he breathed, sounding genuinely surprised. I expected blue, like the pendant, but gold. He moved to stand beside me, placing his hand next to mine on the stone. Immediately, the gold light was joined by silver, the two colors twining together within the crystal like living things. "What does it mean?" I asked, mesmerized by the dancing lights. "It means you carry the blood of not one alpha line, but two. The Moonstar blue from your father, and gold from another line entirely. He looked at me with new wonder. Do you know anything of your mother's family? I shook my head. She never spoke of them. I assumed they were common folk like us. Perhaps not as common as she led you to believe. He watched the intertwining lights for a moment longer before adding softly, "Gold is the color of the Sunfire clan, the Southern Alpha line thought to have died out generations ago." The implications were too vast to grasp. Not just alpha-blooded, but descended from two ancient lines, both supposedly lost to history. It seemed impossible, yet the evidence glowed before us, undeniable. "I don't feel any different," I said, somewhat inanely. "Shouldn't I feel something? Power or strength or, I don't know, wolfishness?" He laughed, the sound startlingly warm in the ancient chamber. The gifts express themselves differently in each person. Some have enhanced strength, others heightened senses. Some develop the gifts gradually, especially if they're unaware of their heritage. His expression softened. "You'll discover yours in time, and I'll help you." I withdrew my hand from the stone, and the light gradually faded, leaving us in the dim glow of wall sconces once more. "This changes everything, doesn't it?" I whispered. "Yes. And no." He took both my hands in his. "Your blood confirms what I already knew, that you are meant to stand beside me, but who you are, your courage, your compassion, your integrity, those things remain unchanged. Those are the qualities that drew me to you, Elowen, not just your bloodline." For the first time since this impossible evening began, I felt something settle inside me, a recognition that perhaps this wasn't complete madness after all. There was a rightness to it that defied logical explanation, a sense of pieces falling into place that I hadn't known were scattered. "I still don't know how to be a queen," I said, finding honesty easier than false confidence. "No one does at first," he replied with surprising gentleness. "But I believe you will learn quickly. And you won't face it alone." He lifted one hand to my face, his fingers brushing my cheek with a tenderness I hadn't expected from one so powerful. "Will you accept, Elowen? Will you be my queen, my mate?" I stared into his silver eyes, feeling as though I stood at the edge of a precipice. One word would change my life forever, would transform me from invisible servant to queen. It seemed impossible, yet the evidence glowed within my memory. The pendant's blue light, the heartstone's golden response, the certainty in his gaze. "Yes," I whispered, surprising myself with the steadiness of my voice. "I accept." Something powerful flashed across his features. Relief, triumph, and beneath it all, a tenderness I was only beginning to understand. He didn't smile exactly, but his expression lightened as if a great weight had been lifted. "Then it is decided," he said softly, his thumb brushing lightly across my cheekbone. "From this moment forward, you are no longer a servant of the palace, but its future queen." The word queen still felt foreign, impossible, like clothing several sizes too large. Yet standing there in the ancient heart chamber, with history humming in the stones around us, and this remarkable man looking at me as though I were something precious, I found a strange courage taking root. "What happens now?" I asked, practical concerns beginning to surface through the haze of revelation. The court is in chaos, the princesses have been publicly rejected, and I'm still wearing a servant's uniform. His lips quirked in amusement. "All valid points. Come, we should return before Lord Chancellor Thorne organizes a search party." He offered his arm once more, and this time I took it with less hesitation. As we left the heart chamber, he locked the door carefully behind us, the key disappearing once more beneath his formal attire. "To answer your question," he said as we walked the ornate corridors, "what happens now is a period of transition. You'll be moved to the royal wing immediately. Tomorrow, we'll begin your formal instruction in court protocol and governance. The coronation ceremony can be prepared within a fortnight." So quickly? The reality of the situation was beginning to settle over me like a heavy cloak. But what of the diplomatic repercussions? Princess Valentia threatened war, and the other princesses can't be any happier. "Let me worry about the diplomatic consequences," he said, his voice hardening slightly. "Princess Valentia's attempt to manipulate the selection gives us significant leverage. As for the others, disappointment is not grounds for conflict." We reached a set of massive double doors, guarded by 4 royal sentinels who snapped to attention at our approach. Beyond lay a large chamber where Lord Chancellor Thorne and several other advisors waited, their expressions ranging from concern to carefully masked disapproval. "Your Majesty." Thorne stepped forward, bowing deeply before acknowledging me with a briefer inclination of his head. "My lady, we've taken the liberty of preparing the blue suite in the royal wing for your immediate use." I recognized the effort it cost him to address me with respect, to accommodate this sudden elevation without showing his true thoughts. His professionalism impressed me, though I harbored no illusions about his private opinion of a servant becoming queen. "Thank you, Lord Chancellor," I replied, summoning the same quiet dignity I'd observed in noble ladies I'd served. "Your efficiency is appreciated." Something like surprise flickered in his eyes. Perhaps he'd expected me to stammer or grovel. The king's hand pressed reassuringly against mine where it rested on his arm. "What news of our guests?" he asked, drawing attention away from me. "The 4 princesses have retired to their quarters. Their attendants are preparing for departure at first light." Thorne's voice remained carefully neutral. "Princess Valentia remains under guard in the East Wing. Her father's ambassador has requested an audience. Granted, but not until morning. Tonight I have more important matters to attend." The king glanced at me briefly. "Lady Meredith will oversee Lady Elowen's transition. Have her sent to the blue suite immediately." I recognized the name. Lady Meredith was the king's aunt, a formidable woman who had served as court hostess since the previous queen's death. She was known for her strict adherence to protocol and uncompromising standards. The thought of being under her instruction was terrifying. "One more thing," the king added. "Send for Master Thaddeus. I want him to examine Lady Elowen tonight." This request raised eyebrows among the assembled advisors. Master Thaddeus was the royal physician, but more importantly, he was a specialist in alpha physiology. His summons confirmed the king's suspicions about my heritage, and would soon make those suspicions public knowledge. "As you wish, Your Majesty." Thorne bowed again. "Is there anything else you require?" "Privacy," the king replied with finality, "until morning. Any matters that aren't immediately pressing can wait." Dismissed, the advisors filed from the chamber, leaving us momentarily alone. As soon as the doors closed, I released a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. "You did well," he said quietly. "The first of many such encounters, I'm afraid. Court life consists largely of maintaining composure while surrounded by vipers." "Encouraging," I murmured, earning another of his almost smiles. "You'll adapt quickly. I've seen how you observe everything, how you navigate the currents of power even from a servant's position." His gaze softened. "That awareness will serve you well as queen." A knock at the door interrupted us. A servant, one I recognized from the kitchen staff, entered with a deep bow. "Your Majesty, the blue suite is prepared. Lady Meredith awaits there, as does Master Thaddeus." "Excellent. We'll go now." The king turned to me. "Ready?" I wasn't, not remotely, but I nodded anyway. What choice did I have? Events had been set in motion that couldn't be undone. The only path now led forward, into this strange new life. The blue suite proved to be a luxurious apartment in the royal wing, consisting of a sitting room, bedroom, private bath, and study. More space than I had ever had to myself in my entire life. Lady Meredith awaited us in the sitting room, her tall figure as rigid as her expression. "Your Majesty," she curtsied with perfect form before turning cool eyes to me. "My lady, I understand congratulations are in order." If there was disapproval in her tone, it was too subtle to challenge. The king seemed satisfied with her greeting. "Thank you, Aunt. Lady Elowen will require your guidance in the coming days. I trust you will provide it with your usual thoroughness." "Of course, Your Majesty." Her gaze assessed me with clinical precision. "We shall begin at dawn. There is much to cover before the coronation." "Indeed." He turned to me. "Master Thaddeus will see you privately. I'll return after you've had time to settle." He departed, leaving me alone with the formidable Lady Meredith and the as-yet unseen royal physician. I stood awkwardly in the center of the room, acutely aware of my servant's uniform and cap in these sumptuous surroundings. Lady Meredith's expression softened fractionally. "You may sit, child. I imagine this has been quite a day for you." I sank gratefully into a nearby chair, its cushions softer than any bed I'd ever slept in. Yes, my lady, quite a day indeed. I knew your mother, she said unexpectedly, causing my head to snap up in surprise. Lena was a good woman, discreet, loyal. You knew her? I managed, stunned by this connection. Lady Meredith nodded, not well, but enough to recognize that she raised you with care, despite difficult circumstances. Her lips pressed together in a thin line. I cannot say I anticipated this particular development, but I am not entirely surprised by it either. Before I could question her further, a side door opened, and Master Thaddeus entered. He was younger than I'd expected, perhaps 40, with keen eyes and an air of brisk efficiency. My lady, he bowed. I am Master Thaddeus, royal physician. The king has requested I conduct an examination to assess your alpha traits. I'll leave you to it, Lady Meredith said, rising gracefully. When you've finished, ring for assistance. I've assigned 2 ladies' maids to your service. They'll help you prepare for the night. Lady maids. For me. The absurdity of it almost made me laugh, but I managed a dignified nod instead. Thank you, my lady. Once we were alone, Master Thaddeus gestured for me to remain seated while he took a chair opposite me. I understand this is all very sudden for you, he began kindly. My examination won't be invasive, just a series of tests to determine which alpha traits you may possess, dormant or otherwise. Over the next hour, he guided me through various assessments, identifying subtle scents hidden in sealed containers, distinguishing whispered words from increasing distances, grip strength tests against progressive resistance. Some I passed with ease, others revealed nothing remarkable. Interesting, he murmured, making notes in a small book. Your scent recognition is extraordinarily developed, nearly equal to a full-blooded alpha. Yet your strength seems entirely normal for a woman of your size. What does that mean? I asked, fascinated despite my exhaustion. It means your gifts express themselves selectively, which is common in mixed bloodlines. He looked up from his notes, studying me thoughtfully. The king mentioned the Heartstone responded to you with gold light. That suggests Sunfire heritage, which typically manifests in heightened perception rather than physical prowess. Can these traits develop later? Or are they fixed from birth? An excellent question. In pure alpha bloodlines, all traits typically present by adolescence. In mixed lines like yours, some abilities may remain dormant until activated by proximity to another alpha or by extreme stress. He closed his notebook with finality. You possess definite alpha characteristics, particularly in sensory perception. With training, these could be enhanced significantly. His confirmation should have been reassuring, proof that the king's claims about my heritage weren't complete madness. Instead, it only underscored how utterly my life had transformed in a single evening. Master Thaddeus departed, and as instructed, I rang the small silver bell on a nearby table. Almost immediately, 2 young women entered, both a few years younger than my 23 years, both wide-eyed with nervous excitement. My lady, they curtsied in perfect unison. I'm Lily, said the dark-haired one. And I'm Bree, added her companion, a girl with ruddy curls. We've been assigned as your personal attendants. I stared at them, momentarily speechless. Just this morning, I had been their equal, another servant moving invisibly through the palace. Now they curtsied and called me my lady, with evident sincerity. Thank you, I managed finally. I'm not accustomed to being attended. You'll need to guide me in how this works. They exchanged glances, clearly not having anticipated this response, before Lily stepped forward. We've prepared a bath for you, my lady, and selected some night clothes that should fit until proper garments can be made. The bath proved to be a revelation, a deep copper tub filled with steaming, scented water, so different from the hurried weekly wash with cold water that servants were permitted. I sank into its depths with a sigh of pleasure, allowing Bree to wash my hair while Lily laid out night things on the massive bed in the adjoining chamber. Clean, wrapped in a silk nightgown that must have cost more than I'd earned in a year, I dismissed the girls with thanks and found myself finally, blessedly alone. The events of the day crashed over me like a wave. leaving me trembling on the edge of the enormous bed. A servant this morning, the king's chosen mate by evening. The revelation of alpha blood in my veins. Court intrigue, attempted manipulation, public declarations that couldn't be undone. It was too much to process, too overwhelming to accept as reality, rather than some elaborate dream. A soft knock at the door interrupted my spiraling thoughts. "Allowen?" His voice, somehow both commanding and gentle. "May I enter?" "Yes," I called, quickly wrapping a robe around myself. The king entered, having shed his formal attire for simpler clothing, a loose white shirt and dark trousers that made him look almost ordinary, though nothing could diminish the power of his presence. "I thought you might have questions," he said, remaining near the door, as if conscious of propriety, despite his earlier declarations, or perhaps just need to talk. The consideration in this simple gesture, checking on me, acknowledging my disorientation, touched me unexpectedly. "I have so many questions I don't even know where to begin," I admitted. He smiled then, a genuine expression that transformed his austere features. "Start anywhere. We have time." "Your name," I blurted. "I don't even know your name. Your real name, not just your title. I can't keep thinking of you as the king if I'm to be your mate." His smile deepened. "Elian. My name is Elian." "Elian," I repeated, testing the sound of it. The name suited him somehow, strong, but with an unexpected softness. "What else?" he prompted, moving to sit in a chair near the window, maintaining a respectful distance that both disappointed and relieved me. "Why me?" The question that had been burning since his declaration in the Grand Hall. Even with alpha blood, even with the pendant and the heartstone, why choose someone with no training, no connections, no knowledge of how to be queen? It makes no political sense. He considered this for a moment, his expression growing serious. "Do you know much about alpha bonds, Elowen? About how we choose our mates?" I shook my head. "Only servants gossip, that alphas can somehow sense their true match, that once bonded, the connection is unbreakable. That's the essence of it." He nodded. "What the stories don't capture is how it feels from within. From the moment I saw you in that hall, something in me recognized something in you. Not consciously at first, but at a level beyond thought or reason." He leaned forward, his intensity filling the space between us. "The selection ceremony exists because this recognition is real, because an alpha rules best, most justly, with their true mate beside them. But political marriages can be stable, even cordial, but they lack the depth of a true bond." His gaze held mine. "My father married for political advantage, not by alpha choice. He respected my mother, but there was always something missing between them. A hollowness at the core of their union that affected everything, including his rule. I absorbed this, trying to reconcile my servant's understanding of royalty with this more intimate perspective. As for why you," he continued softly, "beyond the bond itself, I watched you today. I saw your compassion with the other servants, your quiet dignity despite your station, your quick mind and observant nature. Those qualities matter more in a queen than political connections or formal training." His words warmed me in places long cold, but doubts still lingered. "The court doesn't seem to agree, and the neighboring kingdoms, the court will adapt," he said with quiet confidence. "As for the kingdoms, some will protest, others will wait and observe, a few may even approve. But none will act against us without cause." He smiled slightly. "Besides, a queen of dual alpha lineage with both Moonstar and Sunfire blood carries significant diplomatic weight once the initial shock passes." I considered his words, finding a strange comfort in his certainty, even as questions continued to swirl. "You mentioned my mother earlier, that she might have been protecting me by hiding my heritage. Do you think she knew what I was, what my father was?" Elian nodded slowly. "I suspect she knew enough to be cautious. The pendant alone would have told her your father was no ordinary man, and if she had any connection to the Sunfire clan herself, she would have understood the risk of discovery." "But why?" I pressed, needing to understand. "Why would my heritage be dangerous? Politics," he said simply. 20 years ago, relations between alpha territories were strained. Mixed bloodlines were viewed with suspicion, potential claims to multiple thrones, divided loyalties. Children of such unions were sometimes eliminated. The implication sent a chill through me. My gentle mother, hiding me in plain sight as a palace servant, perhaps the safest place, where daily proximity to royalty would actually make me less conspicuous than isolation would have. I wish she had told me, I whispered, grief and gratitude tangling in my chest. All those years of silence, carrying that burden alone, she protected you the only way she knew how, Elian said gently, and she succeeded. You survived. You thrived, even as a servant. And now you've found your way to where you belong. Do I belong here? The question escaped before I could contain it, raw with vulnerability. Everything is happening so fast. What if this is a mistake? What if I fail? He rose from his chair then, crossing the distance between us to kneel before me where I sat on the edge of the bed. The position, a king kneeling before a servant, was so incongruous it stole my breath. You belong exactly where you are, he said, his voice low and certain. The bond doesn't make mistakes, Elowen. And as for failing, we all fail sometimes. The measure of a ruler isn't in avoiding failure, but in how they respond to it. He took my hands in his. Besides, you won't face these challenges alone. The warmth of his touch, the sincerity in his eyes, anchored me against the tide of doubt. I found myself believing him, not just intellectually, but with a bone-deep certainty that defied explanation. Thank you, I said simply, for seeing me when I was invisible, for believing in me before I could believe in myself. Something shifted in his expression, a softening, a vulnerability that matched my own. Slowly, giving me every chance to withdraw, he raised one hand to my face, fingers tracing the curve of my cheek with reverent care. I should let you rest, he murmured, though he made no move to leave. Tomorrow will bring many challenges. Stay, I whispered, surprising myself with my boldness. Just to talk, a little longer. His smile was answer enough. He moved to sit beside me on the bed, a respectful distance between us, yet close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from him. We talked for hours, the formal barriers between king and servant dissolving as we shared pieces of ourselves. He told me of his childhood in the palace, the weight of expectation that had been his constant companion. I shared stories of my mother, of growing up in the servants' quarters, of finding small joys in a life of prescribed limitations. Gradually, the strangeness of our situation receded, replaced by a growing sense of connection that felt both new and somehow ancient, as if we were remembering rather than discovering each other. I must have dozed off eventually, for I woke to early morning light and the realization that I was alone, a blanket carefully tucked around me. On the pillow beside me lay a single white rose and a note in elegant script. Begin as you intend to continue. With courage, E. The next fortnight passed in a blur of lessons, fittings, and introductions. Lady Meredith proved a demanding but fair instructor, drilling me in everything from court protocol to diplomatic history. I learned which fork to use at state dinners, how to address visiting dignitaries, the complex hierarchy of noble houses, and the even more complex web of alliances that bound our kingdom to its neighbors. Shoulders back, she would remind me constantly. You're not carrying linens anymore. A queen's posture speaks before her words do. Master Thaddeus continued his examinations, gradually helping me understand and develop my alpha traits, my enhanced senses, particularly scent and hearing, strengthened with practice, though I showed no signs of the physical prowess common to male alphas. The Sunfire line was known for perception rather than strength, he explained during one session. Their queens were often gifted with extraordinary insight. Some said they could scent truth from lies, or sense danger before it manifested. These lessons took place alongside countless fittings for my new wardrobe, meetings with court officials who barely concealed their skepticism, and rare, precious moments alone with Elian. These became my sanctuary, brief interludes where I could simply be Elowen, not the servant-turned-queen who was scrutinized with every breath. Not everyone at court accepted the situation with grace. A faction of nobles, led by Lord Harwick, the same baron who had reprimanded me during the selection ceremony, openly questioned my suitability, though never within the king's hearing. "They fear change," Elian told me, when I confessed my awareness of their disapproval. "And they fear losing influence. Many had hoped I would choose Princess Valentia or Princess Serafina, women they believed they could manipulate." "And me?" I asked. "Do they think I'll be easier or harder to control?" His smile held a predator's edge. "They haven't decided yet. That uncertainty works in our favor." As the coronation approached, diplomatic responses from neighboring kingdoms began to arrive. Some were coolly formal, acknowledging the king's choice without enthusiasm. Others expressed cautious congratulations. Princess Valentia's father sent a terse note disavowing his daughter's actions and affirming continued peace. Though the underlying tension was clear, most surprising was the response from the mountain territories. Princess Serafina herself wrote, not with bitterness as I had expected, but with scholarly interest in my newly discovered heritage. "The reemergence of Sunfire blood could rebalance old alliances," she wrote. "I would welcome further discussion when diplomatic relations permit." This unexpected opening led to my first real contribution to court politics, a suggestion to invite Princess Serafina back not as a royal bride candidate, but as a diplomatic envoy and scholarly advisor on alpha bloodlines. "A bold move," Lord Chancellor Thorne commented when I proposed it in council, "but potentially valuable. The mountain territories have extensive archives on the old alpha clans, resources that could help us understand the implications of Lady Eloan's heritage." It was the first time he had acknowledged that my presence might bring advantages, rather than simply complications, a small victory that bolstered my confidence. The night before the coronation, I stood on the balcony of what were now my permanent chambers in the royal wing, watching moonlight silver the palace gardens below. My official ladies' maids, now increased to 4, had been dismissed for the evening, leaving me alone with my thoughts. So much had changed in such a short time. The servant girl who had polished goblets and turned down beds seemed a distant memory, though she lived on in my determination to treat the palace staff with respect and understanding. I wore silks now instead of rough cotton, slept in chambers larger than the entire servants' dormitory, and bore the weight of addressing nobles and diplomats who had once looked through me as if I were invisible. Yet beneath these external transformations, I remained Eloan, my mother's daughter, observer of human nature, survivor of life's hardships. Those qualities, Elian insisted, were why the Alpha Bond had recognized me as his match, why I would make a worthy queen despite my unorthodox origins. A soft knock interrupted my reflections. "Enter," I called, expecting perhaps Lady Meredith with last-minute instructions for tomorrow's ceremony. Instead, Elian stepped through the door, closing it quietly behind him. In the 2 weeks since the selection, our meetings had been frequent but always proper, conducted with the decorum befitting our positions, if not our declared connection. Though the alpha bond between us was acknowledged, the more formal aspects of our union would wait until after the coronation, a concession to tradition that I secretly appreciated as I adapted to my new role. "I thought you might be anxious," he said, crossing to join me on the balcony. I know I was, the night before my coronation. Terrified would be more accurate, I admitted with a small smile. Tomorrow it becomes real, irrevocably real. No more preparation, no more rehearsals. Just a servant girl becoming queen before the entire kingdom. Not just a servant girl, he corrected gently. A woman of dual alpha lineage, chosen by bond and by heart. His hand found mine, fingers intertwining with familiar warmth. And not alone. The simple touch anchored me, as it always did. In these moments together, the connection between us seemed to transcend the political complexities surrounding us. Something primal yet tender, powerful yet vulnerable. "I've brought you something," he said, producing a small velvet box from his pocket. A coronation gift. Though perhaps a bit early, I accepted the box with trembling fingers. Inside, nestled on dark silk, lay a pendant, a silver crescent moon embracing a golden star, an elegant reimagining of my mother's simple trinket. "It's beautiful," I whispered, touching it reverently. "The royal jeweler created it based on your original pendant," Elian explained. "The silver is from the Moonstar mines in the north. the gold from the ancient Sunfire territories in the south. Together, they represent the bloodlines that flow in your veins, and the union of our kingdom's future. Tears pricked my eyes as he lifted the pendant from its box and moved to fasten it around my neck. The metal felt warm against my skin, as if recognizing its rightful place. "There's something else," he said, his voice growing serious. "News that arrived just this evening. I wanted you to hear it from me before tomorrow's ceremony." A flicker of anxiety tightened my chest. "What is it?" "A delegation has arrived from the eastern forests, a territory long isolated from our diplomatic circles. They claim to have recognized your pendant from royal records dating back centuries." His eyes held mine steadily. "They believe you may be the last descendant of their lost ruling line, a bloodline that was thought extinguished during the border wars." The revelation stunned me into silence. Another layer to my already complicated heritage, another claim on blood I was only beginning to understand. "What does it mean?" I finally managed. "For us? For the kingdom?" "Potentially, a powerful new alliance. The eastern forests have kept to themselves for generations, but their resources, particularly in terms of ancient knowledge and rare materials, could be invaluable." He squeezed my hand reassuringly. "But that's for later consideration. I only tell you now so you aren't caught off guard if their representatives approach you after the coronation." I nodded, processing this latest development. From invisible servant to potential heir of 3 alpha bloodlines, the transformation was beyond anything I could have imagined. Sometimes I wonder if I'm still the same person I was 2 weeks ago. I confessed softly. If the girl who polished goblets would recognize the woman I'm becoming. "She would," Elian said with quiet certainty. "The core of who you are hasn't changed, Elowen. It's merely being revealed, like a sculpture emerging from marble under a skilled artist's hands." His fingers brushed my cheek. "I see you, both who you were and who you're becoming, and both are worthy of the crown you'll receive tomorrow." In that moment, standing in the moonlight with his heartfelt words wrapping around me like a shield, I finally believed him. Not because he was king, not because of alpha bonds or ancient bloodlines, but because the truth of his perception resonated with something deep within me, a strength I had always carried but never fully recognized. Tomorrow I would stand before the kingdom as their new queen, my servant's past transformed into a foundation rather than a limitation. I would face Lord Harwick and his faction with dignity, born of hard experience. I would welcome the delegation from the eastern forests with the composure Lady Meredith had drilled into me. I would begin the work of being not just a symbolic queen, but a true partner in governance, bringing my unique perspective to the challenges facing the realm. And through it all, Elian would be beside me, not as my master, but as my equal, bound by something deeper than tradition or politics. "I'm ready," I said, the words feeling like a vow, "for tomorrow, for all that comes after." His smile, rare and genuine, illuminated his features. Slowly, with deliberate care, he leaned forward to press his lips to mine in our first true kiss, gentle yet electric, a promise of deeper connection to come. When we parted, his silver eyes held mine with an intensity that still made my breath catch. "The court expected me to choose a princess," he said softly. "Instead, I found a queen." In those words, in the certainty of his gaze, I found my final answer. The servant girl hadn't disappeared. She had transformed. Her resilience, her observant nature, her quiet strength now assets for the queen I would become. The moon had always been there, hidden behind clouds of circumstance. Tomorrow it would finally shine in full view, taking its rightful place in the sky.